Hello and welcome to the SprocketPod, our weekly podcast where we go live on LinkedIn and talk about all things helpful HubSpot content. If you don't know who I am, my name is Cameron Collins. I am a revenue operations strategist with RevPartners. I am also an avid fan as a community manager in the Sprocketeer community. We are the largest independent community for HubSpot admin. Got my co-host Mark Lerner here. Hey, Mark.
Yeah, Mark Lerner, Director of Growth Marketing at DealHub. We are a next-gen CPQ solution, native integrations with all CRM ecosystems, including HubSpot.
And we have our guest today, Frank. Frank, go ahead and tell everyone a little bit about yourself and some of the stuff that we'll be talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. Great to be here, guys. Thanks for having me. So, I'm Frank Devine. I am the solutions engineer here at RevPartners. So, I was brought in to help take our sales process to the next level as we continue to see HubSpot expanding into enterprise accounts and engagements. There's more and more complex solutioning that's happening. So, my background prior to coming here, I was a director of RevOps. I was a one-man RevOps team for 2 years building out HubSpot for a food tech startup. So, I've done a lot of work through like the sales and sales ops lens. Started out as a BDR back in 2015. So I've worn a lot of hats, but I'm really glad for that journey because I think it helps me be more thoughtful when creating solutions. I'm thinking about that end user because I've sat in that seat. I've made the cold calls. I've faced the rejection. I've done the complicated CRM processes. I know how much it sucks. So I want to try and help RevOps leaders achieve their goals in HubSpot, but also make sure that it's something that's easily adoptable by the end users. So that's what I do.
I'm so excited to dig into this because we've had sales leaders on here, we've had revenue operations professionals in here, but it's rare that we get to look at things from the perspective of what are customers really looking for coming into either into the HubSpot ecosystem or into working with an agency or a company like Rep Partners in the ecosystem. And so this is a really exciting thing that we'll be exploring and dissecting today. Something that we were talking about before we were going live here on the show was the difference between potentially what customers are looking for in going into an engagement, whether that's revenue operations or maybe that's more of a HubSpot admin. And I know you mentioned a third option, so I want to just open it to you to dive into that topic a little bit and tell us a little bit about what people tend to look for coming into an engagement.
Yeah, absolutely. So it varies a little bit depending on how they discovered Rev Partners. So for those people who have found us on LinkedIn, they're interacting with content, they're seeing the great stuff that you're sharing, or Rob, or Rashida, or Shadab, and they understand what Rev Partners is, revenue operations as a service, fractional resources. They're coming in and they understand they want RevOps, they want the HubSpot expertise. But I think more the average person who's coming in, who's maybe finding us in the partner directory or getting introduced by a HubSpotter, is in the more traditional mindset of, I need a consultant. I need somebody that's going to help me with this project. And so they're coming in with, I have a specific task in mind around some sort of pain, something's broken in my system, or we're looking to upgrade or add a new hub, and I need to execute this project. So through the course of having that conversation and understanding what they want, we're starting to expose them to those ideas of your CRM. I know that you're trying to accomplish this project, but your CRM is a product. It's constantly evolving, constantly changing, and we can certainly help you achieve this goal. But we want you to also take a step back, zoom out a little bit, and think about your greater process. What's coming into this process? What's coming out of it? And open you guys up to the idea of what does it look like to have actually continuing support beyond just this engagement. So I think a lot of people are coming to us. I need to accomplish this goal, and it's very tactical. It's very like it starts here and it ends there. And so we can certainly meet that need, but we really try to expose them to what else they could unlock for typically around the same price that they are willing to spend to solve this one project.
Are you usually dealing with people that are like tabula rasa? They have nothing set up. They're using Google Sheets or paper and pen, or is it more often someone has some sort of system set up, but it's either just wasn't done correctly, or it's become too convoluted, or they've changed their entire model, or is it all of the above.
It's the full spectrum. It's least common to encounter the paper and pencil, it's just a spreadsheet. We don't have any sort of CRM, but it has happened. I've been in this role, it'll be a year in December, and I've seen a lot more variation than I expected. But the standard is people have HubSpot and it's been up and running for a year or two. They're like, it's fine. It's a CRM. It does what I need it to do. I get deals, I close deals. But tapping into or understanding what it's capable of, like really actually capable of, that's completely beyond comprehension for the majority of them. So I'm usually coming in seeing almost always life cycle stages are broken. Some of these foundational core components that we would consider like RevOps maturity level 1, like we need to get these foundational things done first and then expanding into other things. But a lot of times, yeah, it's this over-engineered nightmare of custom objects, 2,000 reports, 2 million contacts, and 50% of them have bounced emails. So there's a lot of technical debt that we have to wade through, even in our wonderful HubSpot that we love. If you come from Salesforce, you could break any CRM. Like it's not the CRM, it's the user.
Yeah.
And it's a really interesting thing to dive into because nobody wants to find out that their instance is messy in ways that they didn't think about, especially if they have a specific project in mind. Then I'm sure that the last thing they want is, great, this is going to take me another 9 months to do all these things that I really didn't have in mind. But the reality is that the CRM is the cornerstone of your business. And so, ultimately, the primary topic of our conversation today is how do you set good expectations for customers? And it's, I think, starting with letting them know the value that you can add. And if they have a project in mind and they only want to know how can I achieve this and you give them a recommendation above and beyond that, maybe they don't want to go with that and you're okay, now I'm going to tell you what I can do within the scope of what you want, but letting them know that output may not be what you are expecting because you're not going to follow these other recommendations. That would be my first thought. But Frank, I'm curious if you have anything to add when it comes to setting the expectations around here's what the customer wants and here's how we can deliver toward that.
Yeah, it's a good question. It's really important. And I think the nuance comes in who are you talking to? What's this person's role at the company? Because that greatly influences how they view HubSpot, how they view this project that they're trying to solve. Your VP of sales, if I'm talking to him, he wants to solve this. If I'm talking to him or her, they want to solve this one thing that's driving them nuts is blocking their reps. And they really don't care about anything else because they are so focused on driving to that revenue. If I'm talking to the CRM admin or RevOps team, they're definitely much more open and curious. What else is wrong? What's broken? How can we fix these different things? They're super curious. If you're talking to the CEO, they're like, I think everything's probably broken. Everything could be improved. We want to make it more streamlined, but I need to understand what we're going to get for it. So those three sort of personas, you're going to message totally differently to them. But when it comes to the difference between an ongoing RevOps engagement or even like a HubSpot admin continuing engagement, the expectations are going to be totally different than going, say, an SOW route. We have a specific scope. We are going to do X, Y, and Z. We will go as far as this and no further. We can go further, but it's a new conversation. It's new money. But this is what these dollars will get you. So it's very important to have clarity on everything before pens come out and things get signed.
I'm curious because, of course, I know that you're really strong at what you do in part because of the background that you have, having been in revenue operations, having actually done this. You're not having these conversations from the perspective of how do I close a sale so much as how do we actually solve a problem because you understand what the problem is and how to solve it. And so, with that in mind, I'm really interested to understand because I know you and I haven't had this conversation before, but like, what does it mean to qualify a customer? What makes for somebody that is going to jump into an engagement, work with a solutions partner like RevPartners, or hire a HubSpot admin or revenue operations professional and really get the most value out of that person or that collaboration?
Yeah, so thankfully, I don't have to do as much of the qualification. That falls on our great account executive team. I'll be candid, I'm not cheap. So to start looping in solutions engineer or my counterpart, our solutions architect, it's adding dollars on our side to get the deal done. We want to make sure before we access additional resources that this is a qualified prospect. So the initial discovery call, our account executive is going to understand who this person is. They're going to get an idea of that person's budget. They're going to hint at ranges of what they've seen similar projects go for and see how that person reacts. Do they fall out of their chair, or are they just like, yeah, that's what I expected. Okay, let's like keep going. So a lot of that qualification happens up front. But then once I'm getting in, I'm more trying to understand, are there like literal technical blockers to executing this? I've been involved in an engagement for the past 2 months where we've been trying to understand if we can build an integration with a niche CRM solution to pull in data into HubSpot and create marketing attribution. And it has been a long process back and forth to figure out, can we even do this? The person is willing, they're qualified, but there's a technical blocker that got in our way. And unfortunately, we weren't able to find a solution for that. They just, the API is too weak. We can't access the data points that we need. That's my type of qualification, what is and isn't possible from a technical perspective.
And I imagine that technical limitations are hopefully minimal or
This is the first
continuing to
time.
decrease.
It's the first time I've actually had to tell somebody no. And it was, there's an API. So yeah,
Are you not gonna name and shame this other CRM that had a bad API?
No, because nobody will have heard of it. It's that
Really?
niche. Doesn't matter.
Okay.
It's less about, hey, there's an API. You can create a connection. But can I access the data that I need within that platform to produce the data and insights? So the conversation I had with our prospect, is an integration possible? Yes. Will it accomplish what you want? No. Are there other workarounds that we can try and accomplish for you? Here's all 4 different ideas that we've had and we've evaluated. But ultimately, this is not going to deliver the data that you want or the experience that RevPartners wants to say, yes, we did this. We did this crazy wild workaround that sometimes works and we charge a bunch of money for it. No, that's not us at all. Thankfully, we are finding a unique solution from the other end of marketing attribution, and we're exploring that. But yeah, that API was a blocker.
And not to speak specifically into Rev Partners here with this next statement, but I think one of the things that makes for a really good HubSpot admin is someone who understands business and revenue operations, because all too often we see situations where we knew we could do something, but we didn't ask ourselves if we should. We built this, it's complex and it works, but it doesn't necessarily solve the root problem, which is ultimately always going to be better data integrity, whether that's for reporting, for executives, for sales reps, whatever the case may be. But if you're not building something with the purpose of making a better user experience in HubSpot or creating better data integrity in HubSpot, then ultimately you're really just adding bloat and tech debt into the ecosystem, even if it's a native HubSpot workflow that you're having. So I think that it's important that for anyone who is looking at hiring a person, looking at solutions partners, if you're a solutions partner and you're qualifying customers and prospects, it's really important to have that conversation around, is this going to actually benefit the end user and the customer, or are we just building something and charging a bunch of money for the sake of collecting revenue? And to each agency and to each company their own. But ultimately, I think that speaks into the customer experience is making sure that as, again, either a company hiring an individual or a solutions
Mm.
partner working with a customer, you are thinking about the end user. And that's where, Frank, having you on board earlier in the process, it would be easy for a sales rep to close a sale and then pass it off to a strategist or a HubSpot admin and say, build this. It's a lot more difficult for us to have you involved and then say, should we do this? Is it going to get the output that is actually going to benefit the customer?
I love this
Yeah.
comment from Christine from LinkedIn. For real, as a technologist, it's super easy to fall into the trap of building something that works but doesn't actually fit into the process. I certainly have fallen into that. No, you're gonna want this. Trust me.
I've done it a
Exactly.
bunch of times as an admin in HubSpot in previous jobs. And then 3 months, 6 months down the road, I'm like, oh my God, I'm spending all this time on my awesome solutions. And now I have no time for anything else because I didn't actually engineer this well, or I should have asked for help, or yeah, it worked at the time, but now we've outgrown it. But I think, Cameron, going back to your point, particularly in a sales engagement, a sales conversation, you cannot compromise your integrity. And there have been multiple times that we've had very candid conversations with prospects. Here's what we can do. It's going to cost this much. It's going to deliver you exactly what you want. And the first question is always, can I get a discount? What can we do on price? Hey, we know that we're not the cheapest on the market, but you know what you get for it? You get every penny's worth. You're going to get a true solution. And we've had people say, hey, I'm sorry, we're just going to have to try and go with another route. And I've had at least 6 engagements in 10 months not work out initially and come back to us when they open up budget or when the other vendor that they've selected doesn't work out, whatever it may be, but they want to come back. They've seen and experienced it, and that I've built trust even if we didn't close the deal then. And I'm not going to compromise on it because I know these things will come back eventually. And we're not going to cut corners to get something done now that could result in a poor experience or somebody who's not totally satisfied with RevPartners.
And to some of the points that you touched on and tying it into what I think is a hot topic in the community, but adoption, right? Because even if we build them exactly what they want and nobody is using the solution or looking at the report or whatever it is, you can build it and it can work. But if it's not being used, then really there's no value that's driven. Are there conversations early on in the process that revolve around adoption and how do you intend to use this? Or is there a plan for next steps if we build this? How do you have those kind of like end state conversations if they do take place?
Yeah, it comes up. We don't get into as much of exactly how we're going to drive adoption of this process because typically it's we're trying to get people through the door and they're like, hey, are you going to help us with this afterwards? And then we'll discuss, hey, we are going to have training that's personalized to your teams that is directed around these different things. And it depends on the type of engagement. If I'm just configuring HubSpot, yeah, we're going to do group setting trainings. We'll have office hours where people can come in and have Q&A. But we want to ultimately, I tell everybody, our North Star metric is adoption. If people don't use it, I have failed. We have failed. So that's our emphasis in everything. And that's why we try to create smooth solutions that are easy to adopt. But I think a lot of times, if you're looking at a custom integration, building something from scratch in an API, using a middleware or something, there's a lot more training because we're going to have to document everything that we've created. We're going to have to pass off ownership of this integration, and they will have to understand how to troubleshoot it. If they get a sync error, what does that mean? How do they fix it? So we're going to take that much more technical approach. So it's tailored to the type of engagement, but it's something that has consistently stood out in feedback from people who have gone with us or who haven't. Hey, you guys are offering greater levels of quality assurance and testing and trialing to make sure everything works, but also driving that adoption, the training being available for us.
I'm interested to know because ultimately adoption is the North Star metric. And what adoption looks like can vary based on, as you mentioned a moment ago, the nature of the engagement, what the expectation is, and what the end goal is. With that in mind, though, I know that coming into any engagement, there's a couple of different types of engagements that, in particular, at Rev Partners that we work with. But I know that this also trickles out to broadly how most companies tend to work with their customers. And it's also how I think independent HubSpot admins should be thinking about any type of request that they have. So, you've got your scope of work, your fast track, and your revenue operations as a service that's using our naming conventions. But I'd love to have that translated into what does that mean to have a scope of work engagement versus a fast track versus RevOps as a service? And then how do we translate that into things that maybe the everyday HubSpot admin is doing versus other solutions?
Okay, this is a big question. So if I miss any points, ask it again. I'll get to it.
We'll
Um,
unpack it.
yeah, I would add, don't forget guided onboarding. This is a really important element that we offer as well for those people who they want to have that ownership. They want to understand how their HubSpot account works and they're not afraid to get their hands dirty, but they want expert guidance along the way. better than what you're going to get standard out of the box from HubSpot. So guided onboarding is more like, we'll sit next to you while you build it, and we'll tell you about best practices. We'll help you uncover blind spots, etc. From there, you go into a fast track. Fast track would be HubSpot configuration to best practices with some level of customization to your business. So it can be any of the hubs, or if you're doing the full suite, you can do all of the hubs. But here's what we know from implementing literally hundreds of HubSpot accounts, configuring them across dozens of industry types. You need to have the base fundamentals. You need your life cycle stages. You need a sales pipeline. You need basic reporting for sales, for marketing, and these configuration components. So the fast track is 60 days, we'll get you up and running in Sales Hub. And so emphasis on fast. It's configured, it's trained, it is going to be personalized. So your sales stage is not like stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. It will be in your naming convention. It will be tailored to what your business need is. So you're going to be providing certain data inputs, but there's going to be less customization or bespoke solutioning within a fast track. After that would be like our scope of work, our SOWs. We call them MVPs. We want to either help you launch a new hub or launch a business process, create a custom integration, migrate from one platform to another. And so this is a true SOW where we have a clear statement of work, what we're trying to accomplish, and exactly how we're going to accomplish it in terms of, we engage in agile methodology. So we're going to define the epics that need to be completed. We'll have user stories for each of those for our outcomes. We'll state, here's our assumptions, here's the things that are not in scope. And we'll come and define every single component, and that will then produce what our engagement looks like. So through that is going to be much more customized. It's going to be bespoke to your specific needs. It can be any platform migration, it could be any integration that you need to have done, but it has defined start and stop, and it has a commitment of time that we will try to get this done within. I think the advantage here is, if I screw up on scoping, which thankfully hasn't happened too much, and we need to go over in time, that doesn't turn into greater charges for our clients, because we committed to getting this done. And we're really sorry that it's past schedule, so you're not going to pay extra for this. We're going to get it done right, and you're going to be satisfied with it.
How in depth do you have to go during your scoping to ensure that there's no scope creep that happens along the way?
We go pretty in depth.
Enter Lila.
Yes. So my counterpart, Leila Alvarez, is an actual software engineer. She's also just a freaking productivity powerhouse. The amount of things that she can get done in a day, it just makes me want to quit. I'm never going to be that good, and it's discouraging sometimes. But so let's say, for example, we do our discovery call. The prospect is qualified. Then the executive will book a call with me, where typically we're going to do what's called a reverse demo, a show and tell with the prospect. Share your screen. Let's go into HubSpot or Salesforce or Marketo or whatever program you have, and walk me through your process. Where's the pain points? How do you intend for this to go? And this is where I'm capturing business requirements. What are the goals? Where should this start and stop? I'm trying to uncover skeletons, look under every rock, find the issues that may pop up, so I get a clear understanding of what we're trying to accomplish. I'll take that and turn that into a requirements document for scoping, and pass that to Leila, who will then get access into the platform. So we'll be added as an admin in HubSpot or in Salesforce, and she will go back end. She'll look at all the objects. She'll look at whatever components are needed for this solution and turn that into a Miro board that has the documented requirements. It has her expanded, here's where risk exists, here's where things are not in scope, and then define, here's the solution mapping, how data will flow, and here's the epics that she believes. So she becomes very detailed, and then I turn that into the SOW, but it goes back to setting expectations. That SOW and hitting hard on, here are our assumptions. You need to have this level of partnership with us, meaning like you're going to make yourself available for meetings. You're going to show up on a weekly basis. You're going to give us the access that we need. You're going to define exactly how much data you want to bring over. Like if there's a cutoff date in the past, or are we bringing all of your data? And then here's the nod and scopes. We're not going to go this way. We're not integrating any tools beyond what we're committing to here. We're not migrating data from this other platform. And that puts those guardrails in place. And through that presentation of that solution, it always turns into a discussion. Hey, what do we want to hear on this piece? Or this is too expensive? Or could we add this? And so now I want to map a 100% solution. Tell me everything you'd love it to be. I'm going to create that from scratch. Here's what it looks like. Here's what it'll cost. Sometimes they're like, awesome, green light, let's just go. Most of the time, it becomes a discussion of what do I actually want? Turns into a prioritization exercise, which is really helpful because this is, again, putting guardrails. This is what I do need. This is what I don't need. This is a nice to have. And that creates those expectations to keep us aligned on an SOW that will not have scope creep.
Sounds a lot like a renovation project on your kitchen.
Yeah. I don't think I could get my wife to agree to a no scope creep engagement, but yeah, if I ever hire a contractor someday, I'll try and get that level of detail.
And there's a reason that we're considered revenue architects. All of that leads into the last main type of engagement, at least that we run, which is revenue operations as a service, which we'll dissect. But yeah, I think that when it comes to considering guided onboarding, fast track, revenue operations as a service, and scope of work, a lot of that translates to how, even if you're a company hiring an individual, that HubSpot admin should be thinking about, say, their first 30, 60, 90 days. There's a lot that translates because when you hire a HubSpot admin, or if you're working with a solutions agency, even if you jump in with revenue operations as a service, say, which we'll talk about here in a second, you still have that 30, 60, 90-day period where you want to come in. You want to have quick wins. You want to have some defined things that you're accomplishing. And every engagement is going to have some level of setting expectations that needs to be done. And Frank, I'll let you dive into RevOps as a service, but even if you're just going with, we know we need to make our CRM better and we know we want revenue operations insights, as now a strategist, you still have to then set those expectations and really make sure that it's understood. This is what I'm working on. This is what the priorities are. And here's what's next. So I'll let you dive into RevOps as a service with that in mind.
Yeah, RevOps as a service is the strongest solution that we offer in the marketplace because it recognizes, one, your business is dynamic and your needs will change over time. If the economy takes a dump and it affects your business, you may need to pivot. You may need to move priorities. Secondly, it recognizes also that your CRM is a product. So your CRM needs to be changing and be as dynamic as your business to support your business. And so RevOps as a service is an ongoing retainer based engagement where you're getting a select amount of hours of RevOps support from us. Who's got the music? What? Parties. You're getting a retainer based engagement with us. And what we're going to do is define what those business goals are that you have, what you need to get done. And then at the start of it, we have what's called our revenue engine diagnostic, which is a comprehensive end to end mapping of your business processes from marketing through sales to customer success, retention, renewal. Once you have the landscape understood, now you can say, let's come up with our plan, 30, 60, 90, and everything that we do needs to be in consideration of what are the upstream and the downstream impacts. So this comes in handy for people who are just like, hey, we don't want to hire a RevOps person. It's too hard to hire. It's going to take too much time. It'll take too much time to ramp this person up. It'll cost too much money. And then they need time off and holidays and things. Perfect. Take that budgeted spend, hire somebody like RevPartners, and you'll have always on RevOps support to execute those strategies. Or when somebody comes to us with a big project, something like a multi-hub migration or We're coming out of Salesforce. We've been in it for 18 years. We have customized the heck out of this thing. There's one guy who knows how it all works, but we just can't stomach renewing with Salesforce anymore. We're so sick of them. That is an engagement that you could not ever scope as an SOW. You'll never be able to define it all because you'll just scope forever. So that's where RevOps as a service comes in. But to your point, how do you set expectations? How do you promise deliverables in something that's dynamic and flexible intentionally? That's where it becomes a matter of scoping, ideally what you think will be the first 6 months of the engagement, and then getting into how do I turn this into a story? That's really what I want to try and do. Like we're trying to help a customer right now. It's going to be a 12-month engagement. And we're saying 12 months, give us this many hours per month. No executive is going to sign off on that. They're like, we need to execute this super strategic thing. Okay. So we've been in their systems. We've scoped out their CRM platform, a second CRM platform, and a marketing automation platform. We need to move all of these things. What's the order of operations for these? What's going to happen first? Where are sunset dates? Where are other requirements and things that are going on? And now let's turn that into a story. Essentially 4 chapters. Phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4. What's our goal in this phase? Who's required from their side? What are we trying to accomplish? What are the decisions that you need to make? And what are the risks that we imagine that could come up during this time? And lay that out for all 4. That then sets the expectation. It makes it much more real. It makes it easier for somebody to sign off on a 1-year engagement, feeling like, okay, they know what they're doing. But ultimately, I'm always throwing in too. Don't worry, Cameron. This is what we think, but we're the sales team. We're going to engage our strategist team. We're going to engage our technologist team, and they will tell you what will happen in what order, and they will ultimately own this. But this structure we can give to them. They will tell you exactly what's going to happen each week. It's collaborative. We're setting that expectation up front, and then people in your role are actually living that on a weekly basis and executing against it.
And to the point when it comes to scoping out an engagement and ultimately setting expectations, I think it's helpful to start with working backwards on what are some of the things that create those successful engagements. There's creating healthy timeline estimates. You've got making sure that you have an accurate scope of work for whatever the engagement is. Again, whether you're a solutions partner and you're trying to scope something out, you're a HubSpot admin and you're working on a very specific project or epic, as we would call it, making sure that you are very granular about letting the executive team know or the end user know this is what you should be anticipating throughout the course of the time that we're working on this and as an end result. And so I know that's something that is a big part of the expectation setting that you do. And we've had a couple of people just going through comments where it's been asked, do we charge for scoping at RevPartners? How does it work with creating the process, sending out the quote? Obviously, customers can walk away at any point, but go ahead and as much as you can share around how that ties into like our sales process, which again, I know you and I haven't spoken about, but I'm sure people are curious to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, scoping is included, right? We need to provide the best experience for our clients. So, yes, it is a $0 scoping fee. There are instances, use cases, particularly large engagements where I mentioned our RevOps as a service starts with a revenue engine diagnostic. It's like this 3-week micro consulting engagement where we're mapping things out end to end. If something is super complex or they want very definitive answers, I want to know exactly what's going to happen. Sometimes we will sell Red by itself, Red being revenue engine diagnostic. So in that way, sometimes you can purchase a paid scoping if you choose. If you don't want to go that route, we will do pretty detailed scoping as long as we can validate that there is a legitimate need, that there's a legitimate opportunity for us. We'll go through that scoping as part of our standard sales process.
I bet it's different when you're an individual freelancer as opposed to a larger agency.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you can't do this level If you're just starting out or if you're trying to do this as your side hustle, you need to get paid for every hour that you spend. We've got a pretty good win rate on deals that I'm involved in. For example, my colleague Vinny, who's our account executive here, he and I, when we partner on deals, we have a 50% win rate. Most sales reps, I think they would love a 50% win rate on things. As such, we can include things like scoping for free. But if you're an independent contractor, somebody working on a side hustle, and you can't guarantee I'm going to have a 50% win rate, yeah, you should be compensated for your time, and you should understand sort of the levels of scoping that you're willing to do on the house. I'll audit anybody's HubSpot for free. I can do that in a couple hours. But do you want me to map out how to build a custom API integration and the way that the data is going to flow? You're going to have to pay for that kind of knowledge and time if I'm doing things by myself.
And to the point of takes a couple of hours to do an audit and just take a peek under the hood. Uh, that's something that I love doing. I love being early on in the engagement and just taking a look at everything and formulating my thoughts on here's all of the stuff we can do. Now, the next thought that needs to be what should we do? What should the order of operations be? But ultimately making sure that you have a process for not just taking a look under the hood, but letting the end stakeholder know here's the approach that we're going to take. That's really important. And so just to tie out on the sales process and then actually working with us at Rev Partners or the way it could work at really any agency, Frank, you go through your process, you have the conversations around scoping and setting expectations. The next step is not Rev Partners gets to work building it. The next step is then they talk with a strategist who's essentially doing the same thing all over again, more in depth. And that's in terms of expectation setting, building redundancy into Frank said you're going to get XYZ. I'm telling you day one, that's going to change slightly based on my experience and what I'm seeing and the approach that you and I are going to have together. And I've never had anybody in my experience and in everyone else that I've been talking with as well, where someone has said, no, I was promised this is going to be done this way. For revenue observations as a sort of scope of work, obviously we want to be mindful of delivering what we say we're going to do. But when we look at holistically improving a HubSpot instance, we build redundancy into Frank going in and doing your scoping. And then the first thing we do with our revenue engine diagnostic is Cameron or the strategist goes in and takes another peek and creates my own recommendations for how we want to approach it. So that I think redundancy in the process helps to create good expectations and good
Yeah,
experiences.
I think it's important. It's the old saying, right? Measure twice, cut once. Something I've screwed up a lot of times in carpentry. But the importance in redundancy, there's so much value in having that intentional redundancy. But if you don't set the expectation that you're going to do that, oh man, you get that VP, that director who's just like, I already told Frank all of this. Why are you asking me? Didn't he write it down in the CRM? Come on. So it's important when I'm setting expectations. I'm going to scope as much as we can to build a solution and build confidence and demonstrate our expertise, help you see around corners, help you understand what's going to happen if you do X, Y, and Z. But you're going to go through a more detailed scoping once you engage with us. And that needs to be clear. No one should be surprised when you show up and you're just like, so how many employees do you have? And what different roles and where are all the different things? No one should be surprised by that. And if they are, that sucks. That's a horrible way to start an engagement.
It really plays into the fact that not only do different customers and prospects expect or experience different things, but I think one of the fundamental areas that as an industry we can continue to be better about when it comes to messaging, and this is agnostic of rep partners or any one company or example, but I think that the CRM admin should be really good at revenue operations. And I think ideally you have a revenue operations professional that understands how a CRM works. But those two job functions are not the same thing. Building your CRM and making it function how you want is very different from understanding and analyzing business operations, data, and insights. And I think that as HubSpot becomes more complex, it's important that if you want to elevate as an individual, we've talked about this many times on the show, you have to become competent in both so that you're not just being technical and building stuff in HubSpot, which is a very valuable skill to have. But when it comes to working with executives and elevating as the architect, I think it's important that you have the understanding of RevOps and of being the CRM admin and that you're able to do both.
Absolutely. It's the yin and yang. It's the tactical and strategic capabilities of a person. But it's hard. A lot of us come from being the CRM admin first, and you get so much satisfaction out of getting your playlist just right and then getting into HubSpot on the back end and building. And these are my great ideas. And I'm putting it together. And it's so satisfying when it comes out at the end and you get to show the executive or whoever asked for it. And you're just like, yeah, I kicked butt today. But then being able to develop the skill of going into the meeting with the heads of sales, marketing, and customer success and helping to drive a conversation that leads to decisions and alignment on what a process should be, and being as satisfied with that as you were with the custom object that you built, it's totally different worlds. So it takes time, it takes practice, but you got to throw yourself into that fire a little bit and take those risks. Because if you can't be in the room with those leaders, understanding what they need beyond a checkbox or property or a report, what are they trying to accomplish with this? What's the business process? You got to be able to swim in that pond as well.
And to HubSpot's credit, as they continue to move up market and unlock more and more enterprise features and functionality, 12 months ago, 24 months ago, I think it wasn't unreasonable that you would expect maybe one person can do all these things. HubSpot is becoming more complex. There's no denying that. And there may be a time where the new college graduate isn't able to just learn HubSpot overnight and be a CRM admin for a startup for $40,000 a year. We may already be there. I don't know. But the point is that as HubSpot becomes more complex and continues to grow in the enterprise market, admin need to be following suit. And so even if you are going to be more technical, being able to understand and interpret the why behind what you're building is so important. I remember one of the first requests that I had with an executive, and they asked me to build some workflows and reports, and I created a dashboard for them, and I presented it, and it was exactly what they wanted. But then they asked me, "What do I do with this data?" And that was a rude awakening because
Yeah.
I gave them the report they wanted, but they were asking for me for the insights on what do I do next? How does this impact the business? And that's the difference between being a HubSpot admin, but also then being able to think from a revenue operations mindset where you can say, I built this report. Here's what you do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a hard conversation with my first VP of sales. I was so pumped. I came in with this awesome spreadsheet that I've been working on for weeks, and I was like, here's what it is. And he's, what does it mean, Frank? What does it
Yeah.
mean? Tell me a story. What do I do with this? I love your colors, how you highlighted these things, but what does it mean? Yeah, it's difficult. I would want to also call out mentioning just like HubSpot is growing, HubSpot is becoming more capable. I wouldn't say that HubSpot is more complex. So I don't want people to start thinking that HubSpot, you're going to need to have your Salesforce admin for HubSpot. HubSpot is incredibly capable. It is what you build it. You can build it into complex. You can build it into very sophisticated. You can build it into a dumpster fire. So it is something that has incredible capabilities. I think the barrier to entry to learning how to use these things is still incredibly low. The ability to adopt HubSpot is unmatched at that level of enterprise software, in my opinion.
And it's a good point that I'd agree with in the sense that being able to come in and learn everything is still very doable. Anyone who's taken a Trailhead course will know that it is not apples to apples, and learning even the basics of Salesforce. Everyone knows it's a very robust system, but it's very complex compared to HubSpot, where in time, as it becomes more capable, there's more to learn. And maybe it's just a longer learning curve to figure out all of the additional features that are added in, but it doesn't necessarily make it more difficult to learn how to use some of the newer features. Um, Lead scoring being an example of now they have a native feature. So instead of using a scoring property, there's a native feature. You just need to learn the difference in the two. Not a difficult thing, but one more thing to know. And that's where I think anyone who is starting today or has already started many years ago, we're all in a very lucky place because we have our foundation and fundamentals, and we can continue to build on that as the rising tide raises all boats.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to setting expectations overall, really ultimately, Frank, the most important thing, as we've talked about, is just being very candid in having the conversations around what the expectations are from your customer and also what you can deliver, whether that's timelines, deliverables, if it's going to be scope of work or ongoing, being very clear and direct around this is what you want, this is what we can do, here's how the two marry together. Are there any final points to either HubSpot admin who may be struggling with defining scope of work on various projects, call it, maybe a difference between project and product, or other solutions partners who are struggling with getting their scope of work aligned for potential customers?
Yeah. I think for speaking to the CRM admin out there, oftentimes there's more work than can be done at once, and you're stuck in that tactical execution perspective mindset every day. And it's difficult to know how to prioritize all these different things. It's difficult, even if you've defined your roadmap, to stick to it and to push back on people who are asking you to deviate from it. And that's where I think having a partner like RevPartners or another HubSpot solutions partner can be really valuable because I'm impartial. I'm agnostic to your business. I know what HubSpot best practices are. I have access to a ton of people like Cameron who know a lot more about sales, marketing, customer success best practices, and we are happy to come in and share knowledge. And I do majority of my work I do is free. HubSpot audits are free. Talking to me on LinkedIn is free. I would just encourage any of those admins to talk more, ask for help more, reach out to the RevOps community more. I would challenge almost any business role to find like a more collaborative, helpful community than RevOps because we all are here because we love fixing things and helping people. So I would reach out more. I would ask for help or ask for second opinions. It doesn't even have to be help. Hey, I'm thinking of approaching this project this way. What do you think? Having somebody else to bounce ideas off of is so valuable. Speaking to other solutions partners, it is challenging, right? You need to understand, and it's difficult, especially early on, because you don't want to say no to anything. You need revenue, you need to prove yourself, you need wins and user stories and people who are advocates of you and your brand. But you need to, for yourself, for your business, define where you end. I'm not going to do these things. I'm not going to push beyond this. This is not my area of expertise, or this takes too much time. And so you need to learn how to say no. And that's part of setting expectations. No, I will not do that much, or I'm not going to go into that area, or I can recommend another resource that's great for website design. I'm a CRM admin. I can help with HubSpot. I think that's really important. When it comes to documentation, it's not fun. Nobody likes to produce documentation, but man, it is so valuable. And when you're in potentially a heated conversation, say with stakeholders at your partner, and you can go back and say, but here in the document, this is what we committed to, and this is you agreeing to it here. It's worth the time to actually document these things. Handshake agreements and smiles over Zoom, that's great, but you want to protect yourself and your time, which then protects your money. So it's worth the time to go through that process. What I've done personally is trying to templatize this as much as possible. Every SOW that I write, I take all of my epics, all of my user stories, and I've got this archive of all of them. At this point, I can usually build an SOW in about 45 minutes because I've done similar things and I'm just grabbing, dragging, and dropping. There's bigger lift up front in getting into the documentation game. But if you're smart and you're strategic about how you build that repository, it gets a lot easier. And then there's great tools like PandaDoc and other things out there that you can leverage to further templatize and automate.
I mean, it's really good stuff. To the point of documentation, I don't want to say it's my Achilles heel, but for example, slideshows are not something that I love to do. But preparing an executive slideshow that says, this is what we did, this was the output, do you sign off on it, and getting everything in writing, so important to the overall delivery process. On the flip side, you have all of that being mirrored leading into an engagement with what you do as the solutions engineer, making sure everything is documented along the way. So important. Cover your booty, guys. When it comes to delivering as a HubSpot admin, again, being strategic, so important. You don't just want to build things. And Frank, as you mentioned, one of the greatest assets that any HubSpot admin can do is collaborate. And even if you're an individual admin and you don't have team members at your company that you can speak to about RevOps, about HubSpot, you do have a community of 2,000 plus HubSpot members and users who are in Sprocketeer. So if you're not already there and if you're not familiar, do go ahead and join us on Slack. There's going to be a link in the show notes. But we have, again, 2,000 plus members. It's totally free to join the community in Slack, and you can ask any question about anything, whether it's technical or tactical. And you've got a ton of people who are in there daily who are always willing to help with everything from coding to marketing to sales. Make sure you lean on the community. We're all here to help each other and make HubSpot better for you, for your companies, and continue to elevate it.
The community is so valuable. That's how I landed in this job. It's really important to be connected. But yeah, cautionary tale. If you get too heads down and tactical and forget to be strategic, that's what happened to me in my last job. I was brought in as a strategic resource. And 2 years later, I was so deep in the technical and only executing that, they forgot the value that I would bring to the table. And I was expecting my work to speak for itself in HubSpot. And they lost sight of it. And it was 1 week ago last year that I got unexpectedly fired. Friday the 13th. It was horrible. But because of the connections that I made in the HubSpot community and in the RevOps community, I was able to find out about this awesome company and this awesome job that I never expected that I would, want to do. And I learned such an important lesson, but it's been that motivation to help any of you solo RevOps people or understaffed RevOps teams. I get the struggle, and that's why I'm so excited about the role that I do. And that's who I serve. That's why I'm in this job. I want to help people find success in HubSpot, solve business problems, and look like a badass to their boss. So please come find me. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm available. But if you want me to take a look at your HubSpot, I'm also down for that. Be awesome.
And for those who maybe you're stuck in the tactical, you want to get technical, maybe you're stuck in the technical, you want to get tactical, and you just want to broaden your expertise either way. A lot of people, I think, used to make fun of HubSpot certifications. I know we've poked at them a few times on this show, but they have become so much more robust and involved over the past year and 2 years. They've invested a lot of resources in really building out quality programs and educational resources. We've had boot camp instructors on the show. We encourage everyone to go in and take a look at the library that's in there, because I think oftentimes HubSpot certifications tend to fly under the radar as a resource in addition to the Sprocketeer community. And for members who lean into HubSpot certifications, you have the community, you're looking maybe for a little bit more, maybe you like this podcast, you want to see other personalities who are talking about HubSpot. We also recommend checking out the HubSpot Admin Hug, the HubSpot user group hosted by Deanna Gloff and Kyle Jepson. They host that every Tuesday at 10 a.m. Central. It's always an awesome show. Sometimes it's more technical, sometimes it's more tactical, but it's always a variety of really awesome resources that they're sharing on there. Again, link for that is going to be in the show notes along with everything else, but we do encourage everyone to lean into all your resources, community members, HubSpot certifications, other channels like this. If you enjoyed the show, you can check out past episodes on YouTube and Spotify. The link will be in the show notes shortly to both platforms, but we have all of our previous episodes loading into YouTube and Spotify. And again, we're all in Slack as well in the Sprocketeer community. Frank, thank you so much for joining. Mark, always a pleasure when we get to do these Sprocket Pods. Everyone else tuning in, thank you very much. Sprocket on.
Have a great weekend, everyone.